May 25th, 2020, Minneapolis. A day that would change the world forever. George Floyd, a 46-year-old man, was about to encounter the dark side of the law, a law officer sworn to protect. Derek Chauvin, a veteran police officer, pressed his knee into Floyd's neck for over 9 minutes. Bystanders screamed. Floyd gasped for air. The world watched in horror. Derek Chauvin was a 19-year veteran of the Minneapolis Police Department. To colleagues, he seemed disciplined, experienced, and reliable. But beneath the uniform lay a choice that would shock the nation. On that fateful day, Chauvin's actions would not only take a life, but also ignite protests that swept across the globe. George Floyd was suspected of using a counterfeit $20 bill at a convenience store. Chauvin and 3 officers arrived at the scene. Floyd complied at first, but soon the situation escalated. Chauvin pinned Floyd to the ground, knee on neck, ignoring Floyd's repeated cries, "I can't breathe." Pedestrians filmed, yelling at Chauvin to stop. 9 minutes passed. Floyd lost consciousness. Every second captured on video would become evidence in one of the most scrutinized trials in history. The videos went viral instantly. Public outrage exploded. Authorities launched a criminal investigation. Medical examiners confirmed Floyd died from cardiopulmonary arrest due to law enforcement restraint. The initial police report claiming medical distress was contradicted by video evidence. Experts, witnesses, and the world saw the truth unfold. Derek Chauvin's badge, once a symbol of protection, became a symbol of betrayal. George Floyd's death sparked worldwide protests demanding accountability and reform. One life lost, countless voices awakened. The question remains, how often does power hide behind a uniform, waiting to be abused? Oklahoma City, 2014, a city like any other, but a predator was wearing a badge. Daniel Holtzclaw, a police officer sworn to protect, would betray the very people he was supposed to serve. Behind the uniform hid a man whose crimes would shock the nation and expose the terrifying reality of power abused. Daniel Holtzclaw was a rising star in the Oklahoma City Police Department, a 27-year-old officer with a clean record, admired by colleagues and trusted by the community. But beneath the public image, Holtzclaw was a predator waiting for opportunity. He used his position and authority to target vulnerable women, often black women, sometimes with criminal records, knowing they were less likely to be believed. Holtzclaw's crimes were methodical and chilling. Over months, he pulled women over for minor offenses, jaywalking, loitering, parking violations. Alone in quiet neighborhoods or alleys, he would threaten, intimidate, and sexually assault them. Victims described the same terrifying pattern: fear, confusion, and helplessness. He exploited their vulnerability and the power of his badge to silence them. One victim, a young mother, recalled how he blocked her car, hand on his gun, ordering her out. Another woman, walking home late at night, was confronted alone in a darkened street. Each attack left psychological scars far deeper than any physical wounds, the community whispered rumors. But no one could imagine the full extent of his crimes until the first brave women came forward. The investigation began in 2013, sparked by a pattern noticed by detectives. Multiple women came forward with eerily similar stories. Authorities pieced together evidence, including cell phone records, DNA, and eyewitness accounts. Holtzclaw's attempts to cover his tracks were clever, but the trail of victims was too consistent. Finally, the walls of his facade began to crumble. Detectives worked meticulously. They interviewed victims in detail, corroborated stories, and gathered forensic evidence that would leave no doubt. It became clear that Holtzclaw's abuse of power was systematic, a predator exploiting authority with terrifying precision. In 2014, Daniel Holtzclaw was arrested. The nation was stunned. How could a police officer, someone trained to protect, become a predator? The trial was intense. Victims testified about the assaults, their fear, and the abuse of trust. Forensic evidence confirmed the attacks. Holtzclaw's defense tried to discredit the victims, but the jury saw the pattern. He was convicted of 18 counts, including rape, sexual battery, and forcible oral sodomy. The sentencing was severe, but deserved. Holtzclaw was given 263 years in prison, a punishment reflecting the magnitude of his crimes. The case became a landmark example of the dangers when authority is weaponized against the vulnerable. Daniel Holtzclaw's story is a chilling reminder. Power without accountability can become deadly. The women he harmed spoke out, demanding justice, and their courage exposed one of the darkest betrayals by a law enforcement officer in recent history. Behind the badge that symbolizes protection, Holtzclaw hid a predator, a man whose actions left a trail of fear and trauma. His name is now synonymous with the terrifying consequences of corruption and abuse within the police force. In the 1970s, Florida was the backdrop of one of the most chilling cases in American history. Gerard Schaefer, a deputy sheriff, appeared to be a trusted lawman. But behind the badge and the uniform lurked a man whose crimes would horrify a nation, a serial killer hiding in plain sight. Gerard Schaefer was a deputy in Martin County, Florida. To his colleagues, he seemed dedicated, courteous, and disciplined. But Schaefer harbored a dark obsession. He fantasized about kidnapping, torturing, and murdering young women. By all appearances, he was an upstanding officer, but the reality behind the badge was far more sinister. Schaefer was meticulous in covering his tracks, blending trustworthiness with predation. Authorities first suspected Schaefer when several young women disappeared in the area he patrolled. The victims were often hitchhikers or women walking alone at night. Schaefer's position allowed him to patrol freely, giving him access to potential victims without arousing suspicion. His crimes were deliberate. He would abduct women, restrain them, sometimes torture them, and then murder them, leaving bodies in remote areas. Schaefer documented his crimes in journals and photos, which he believed would never be discovered. It was a horrifying mix of planning, obsession, and twisted creativity. Many victims' disappearances were initially attributed to chance or misadventure, but the pattern was undeniable. Schaefer's crimes escalated over time, yet he remained a respected law enforcement officer, a terrifying duality that would only be revealed through painstaking investigation. The investigation into Schaefer's crimes was complex. Police initially found it difficult to suspect one of their own, but mounting evidence, including a series of journal entries describing murders and photographs of bound women, pointed directly to him. Victims' families grew desperate, and the pressure on law enforcement mounted. Detectives meticulously pieced together witness accounts, circumstantial evidence, and his own writings. It became clear that the man who once patrolled the streets was the same man instilling fear in them. Schaefer was finally arrested, charged with multiple murders and kidnappings. During the trial, the chilling details emerged. Schaefer had planned murders, lured victims under false pretenses, and carried out horrific acts while maintaining his public image. Prosecutors presented evidence including his journals, photographs, and witness testimonies. Schaefer's calm demeanor in court only added to the horror. He was convicted, but investigators believed his true number of victims could be much higher. The case exposed the terrifying reality that someone sworn to protect could be one of the most dangerous threats in the community. Gerard Schaefer's story is a haunting reminder of how evil can hide behind a badge. A man trusted to protect became a predator, targeting the vulnerable with meticulous cruelty. The impact of his crimes left families devastated, a community in shock, and the nation questioning how someone with such dark impulses could serve in law enforcement. His name remains a chilling symbol, a warning of the darkness that can lurk behind the uniform. April 4th, 2015, North Charleston, South Carolina. A routine traffic stop would turn deadly, leaving the nation in shock. Michael Slager, a police officer sworn to protect, would forever change the public's view of law enforcement accountability. The victim, Walter Scott, an unarmed man whose final moments were captured on video for the world to see. Michael Slager was a veteran of the North Charleston Police Department. Known for his years of service, he was considered reliable and disciplined. On that fateful day, Slager pulled over Walter Scott for a minor traffic violation. What happened next would become one of the most infamous examples of police misconduct in modern history. A badge meant to symbolize protection instead became a weapon. The traffic stop escalated when Scott fled on foot. Slager pursued him, drawing his taser and gun. The confrontation was brief, but deadly. Security footage and bystander recordings captured the moment Slager fired multiple times, striking Scott in the back as he ran away. Scott fell to the ground, lifeless. The video showed a man shot in cold blood, unarmed, defenseless, and betrayed by the officer sworn to serve. The footage immediately sparked outrage. The initial police report claimed Scott had attacked Slager, but video evidence told a different story. The narrative of self-defense crumbled under the weight of the visual proof, leaving a nation questioning how such a tragedy could occur. The investigation began quickly. The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division reviewed the dash cam footage, autopsy reports, and witness statement. The evidence was damning. Slager had fired 8 shots, killing Scott, then allegedly planted his taser near the body to justify his actions. Public outrage intensified as protests erupted, demanding accountability. The case highlighted the power of citizen-recorded video in exposing misconduct and challenging the official narrative. Michael Slager was charged with murder. The trial was tense, drawing national attention. Witnesses, experts, and video evidence painted a clear picture of the events. Despite the defense arguing self-defense, the prosecution demonstrated that Slager's actions were unnecessary and deadly. In December 2017, Slager pleaded guilty to a federal civil rights charge and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Justice, however, could not undo the life lost or the pain inflicted on the community. The Michael Slager case became a symbol of systemic issues within policing, abuse of power, the dangers of split-second decisions, and the critical importance of accountability. Walter Scott's life was stolen, leaving family, friends, and a community to grapple with grief and anger. Slager's badge, meant to protect, instead took a life. His story serves as a chilling reminder. Authority must always be paired with responsibility, or tragedy will follow. New Orleans, 1995. A city known for its vibrant culture, music, and nightlife was shaken to its core. One of its own police officers, Antoinette Frank, would betray the badge she swore to uphold, killing her fellow officers and leaving a community in disbelief. Antoinette Frank joined the New Orleans Police Department with pride and ambition. As one of the few African-American female officers, she was seen as a trailblazer. She patrolled the streets, participated in community programs, and appeared dedicated to her duty. But behind the uniform, Frank harbored secrets, a criminal mindset that would erupt into violence and betrayal. On March 16, 1995, Antoinette Frank carried out a shocking act. She ambushed 2 fellow officers, Greg McRae and Robert E. Wettig, during a routine assignment. The officers were found shot to death, their own colleague responsible for the attack. Frank didn't stop there. She also murdered a civilian, Lieutenant Stephen F. Williams, in a robbery gone wrong. The city was horrified. How could a trained officer sworn to protect turn her weapon on those she worked alongside? Frank's betrayal was not impulsive. Investigators discovered months of planning, manipulation, and criminal intent. Her actions revealed a disturbing pattern, the desire for money, power, and control at the expense of life. Each murder was calculated, leaving behind a trail of shock, grief, and unanswered questions. The investigation into Frank's crimes was immediate and intense. Authorities combed through evidence, including witness statements, financial records, and forensic reports. Community members were stunned, struggling to reconcile the image of a dedicated officer with the reality of a murderer among them. Detectives meticulously pieced together Frank's movements and motives, revealing a chilling story of deception and premeditation. Frank attempted to cover her tracks, but investigators uncovered inconsistencies in her statements. Forensic evidence tied her to the crime scenes. Her colleagues, who once trusted her, faced the horrifying truth. One of their own had become a threat from within. The betrayal shook the department to its core, raising questions about recruitment, oversight, and the potential for darkness hidden behind the uniform. Antoinette Frank was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder and robbery. The trial captivated national attention. Witnesses testified about her movements, her behavior, and the chilling planning behind the attacks. Prosecutors presented compelling forensic evidence linking Frank to the murders. Her defense attempted to argue mental instability, but the jury was convinced by the weight of the evidence. Frank was convicted and sentenced to death for her crimes, a rare outcome for an officer betraying her oath. Antoinette Frank's actions remain one of the most shocking betrayals in law enforcement history. She killed not just civilians, but her own colleagues, the very people who trusted and worked alongside her. Her story is a chilling reminder that power, authority, and trust can be weaponized by those who hide darkness behind a uniform. New Orleans would never forget the officer who became a murderer, a stark warning that sometimes the greatest threats come from within. Bolingbrook, Illinois, a quiet suburban town where families felt safe, until Drew Peterson, a decorated police sergeant, turned his home into a scene of horror. Behind the uniform was a man whose personal life would become a nightmare for his wives and a media sensation for the nation. Drew Peterson was a sergeant with the Bolingbrook Police Department, respected by colleagues and known in his community. Married 4 times, Peterson projected an image of charm and reliability. But behind closed doors, his marriages were far from peaceful. Friends and neighbors reported verbal abuse, intimidation, and controlling behavior. The quiet man behind the badge concealed a dangerous pattern, one that would soon turn deadly. Peterson's 3rd wife, Kathleen Savio, died under suspicious circumstances in 2004. Initially ruled an accidental drowning in her bathtub, the case went largely unnoticed. But investigators later revisited the scene, finding inconsistencies in the timeline, unexplained bruises, and signs of foul play. Suspicion grew that Peterson had a role in her death. The story escalated further with the disappearance of his 4th wife, Stacy Peterson, in 2007. She vanished without a trace, sparking nationwide headlines. Drew Peterson, a police officer sworn to uphold the law, was now the subject of intense scrutiny. The community struggled to understand how a law enforcement officer could be linked to 2 women's deaths, 1 confirmed, 1 missing. Friends and family described fear, confusion, and shock as authorities pieced together the chilling pattern. Drew's charm and public image hid a terrifying reality: manipulation, control, and possibly murder. The investigation into Kathleen Savio's death and Stacy Peterson's disappearance was painstaking. Detectives reviewed autopsy reports, interviewed neighbors, and analyzed Drew Peterson's behavior. Forensic evidence contradicted the initial reports, revealing bruises and signs of a struggle in Savio's death. Investigators discovered Drew had financial and personal motives, adding layers to the suspicion. The missing Stacy case intensified the pressure, with federal and state authorities joining the search. Evidence painted a portrait of a man abusing both his authority and his family, a betrayal of the law and human trust. Drew Peterson was eventually charged with the murder of Kathleen Savio. The trial was high-profile, drawing national media attention. Prosecutors presented a meticulous case, including forensic evidence, timelines, and witness testimonies. The jury was convinced that Savio did not die by accident, but at the hands of her husband. In 2012, Drew Peterson was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 38 years in prison. Stacy Peterson's case remains officially unsolved, a haunting reminder of his potential crimes. Peterson's conviction revealed the chilling truth. Even those sworn to uphold justice can manipulate the law and hide behind a uniform. The families of his victims faced a lifetime of grief and unanswered questions, while the nation watched in disbelief. The Drew Peterson case is a stark reminder that evil can lurk behind the badge. A man entrusted to protect his community turned his home into a place of fear and tragedy. His story shocked the nation, challenged public trust in law enforcement, and left a legacy of grief for the families of his victims. The badge, meant to symbolize safety, became a symbol of betrayal, a chilling warning of how power, authority, and personal obsession can intertwine with deadly consequences. Lahore, Pakistan, January 27, 2011. 2 men were shot dead in broad daylight by a man claiming to be a law enforcement officer. The suspect, Raymond Davis, a former U.S. police contractor, would ignite an international scandal that shook diplomatic relations and exposed the shadowy world of intelligence operations. Raymond Davis, a former American police officer turned CIA contractor, was stationed in Pakistan under diplomatic cover. To most, he appeared as just another foreign worker. But beneath the surface, Davis was armed, trained, and operating in a complex web of espionage. His presence in Lahore would soon draw attention for reasons far beyond normal diplomatic activity. On that fateful day, Davis shot 2 men on a busy street. The men, who he claimed were threatening him, died instantly. Local witnesses captured the chaos, showing armed men, traffic halted, and bystanders fleeing. The incident sparked immediate outrage. Was this self-defense, or an illegal killing by a man abusing his authority and his position as a covert officer? The world demanded answers, but the truth was complicated by Davis's CIA connections. Local authorities quickly detained Davis, but questions about immunity, diplomatic status, and accountability arose. The deaths of the 2 men inflamed tensions between Pakistan and the United States, sparking protests and media frenzy. Citizens demanded justice, while international actors navigated a sensitive political situation. The investigation was swift but controversial. Pakistani officials insisted Davis face local justice, while U.S. authorities claimed diplomatic immunity. Evidence was collected, witness statements recorded, and forensic analysis conducted. Each side faced pressure, Pakistan from its citizens, demanding accountability, and the U.S. from its political and intelligence agencies, seeking to protect a covert operative. The case became a high-stakes diplomatic chess game. Political negotiations dominated the background, with both nations trying to balance public outrage, legal procedures, and international relations. The incident highlighted how officers operating in covert capacities could wield lethal power while complicating accountability in foreign countries. After weeks of tense negotiations, Davis was released following a financial settlement with the families of the victims, known in Pakistan as blood money. The settlement, rooted in local law, allowed him to avoid a criminal conviction. While the U.S. claimed diplomatic immunity, Pakistan faced criticism from citizens for allowing a foreign operative to escape justice. The case became an international talking point, illustrating the murky intersection of law enforcement, intelligence operations, and diplomacy. Raymond Davis returned to the United States, avoiding prosecution, but leaving behind 2 dead men and a scandal that would resonate for years. The incident revealed the dangerous power of covert officers operating abroad and the limitations of accountability when authority and diplomacy collide. The Raymond Davis case is a stark reminder that some officers operate in shadows far beyond public scrutiny. Armed, trained, and protected by diplomatic cover, Davis's actions resulted in death, political tension, and public outrage. His story is a chilling example of how authority, secrecy, and privilege can shield deadly actions, leaving ordinary citizens to pay the ultimate price. New York City, a place where the law is supposed to protect its citizens, but in the 2000s, one NYPD officer would betray that very trust. James Allen, sworn to uphold the law, instead used his badge as a weapon to traffic drugs and profit from the very criminal world he was meant to fight. James Allen served as a patrol officer in the NYPD, respected by colleagues and trusted by his community. He attended training, earned commendations, and appeared dedicated to protecting the city. But beneath the uniform, Allen ran a double life. While patrolling streets, he orchestrated a drug trafficking operation, selling narcotics, taking money from dealers, and abusing his position to avoid suspicion. Allen's criminal operation was systematic. He used his position to identify dealers and buyers, gaining inside knowledge unavailable to ordinary criminals. He provided protection to certain traffickers while targeting rivals using intimidation and his badge as leverage. His actions weren't random, they were calculated, profitable, and deeply corrupt. Allen's colleagues had no idea that their fellow officer was exploiting the very system they trusted. The victims of Allen's crimes weren't just rival dealers. They were the citizens of New York, By enabling illegal drug operations and manipulating law enforcement resources, Allen's actions contributed to violence, addiction, and fear in the communities he swore to protect. His betrayal ran deep, hidden beneath years of public service and a polished image. The investigation into James Allen's crimes began when complaints surfaced from community members and internal whistleblowers. Detectives noticed patterns. Officers and citizens reported suspicious activity linked to Allen's patrol areas. Surveillance, wiretaps, and undercover operations confirmed his involvement in drug trafficking. Authorities discovered financial irregularities, unexplained wealth, and connections to known criminal organizations. Every piece of evidence painted the same picture: a police officer abusing his badge for personal gain. The investigation was delicate. Allen's position gave him insight into law enforcement procedures, making him harder to catch. But detectives persevered, building a case that combined first-hand witness accounts, forensic evidence, and documentation of his illegal activities. It became clear that the officer's criminal enterprise was organized and extensive, a stark betrayal of trust. James Allen was eventually arrested and charged with multiple counts of drug trafficking, corruption, and abuse of authority. The trial drew intense media coverage, exposing the shocking depth of corruption within the NYPD. Witnesses testified about Allen's dual life, his manipulation of other officers, and his systematic exploitation of criminal networks. Evidence presented in court left no doubt. A trusted officer had become a predator of both law and community. Allen was convicted and sentenced to significant prison time, a rare but necessary punishment for such a high-level betrayal. The story of James Allen is a cautionary tale of power and corruption. A badge meant to protect became a tool for criminal gain. His actions damaged public trust, endangered lives, and reminded the world that authority without accountability can be deadly. The citizens he was meant to protect paid the price, while Allen's name became synonymous with betrayal and corruption within law enforcement. Baltimore, Maryland, a city struggling with crime where citizens relied on the police for safety. But in the shadows, a group of officers led by Wayne Jenkins turned their authority into a weapon of greed and fear. The Gun Trace Task Force, a squad sworn to combat crime, became a network of corruption, extortion, and betrayal. Wayne Jenkins was a veteran of the Baltimore Police Department, leading the elite Gun Trace Task Force. His job was to fight violent crime, seize illegal firearms, and protect communities. But Jenkins and his team exploited their position, turning crime fighting into a personal cash machine. Officers would rob drug dealers, steal cash and property, and plant evidence to cover their tracks. Jenkins, at the center, orchestrated it all with precision. Between 2010 and 2016, the Gun Trace Task Force conducted illegal searches, assaults, and robberies while claiming to act under the law. Jenkins and his officers stole money and valuables from residents, even as they were sworn to uphold the law. Their actions terrorized communities, particularly in predominantly Black neighborhoods. People who trusted the police found themselves victims of violence and theft, a horrifying inversion of the very protection the badge symbolized. The scope of Jenkins's corruption was staggering. By abusing the trust placed in him, he manipulated systems, intimidated citizens, and profited from crime. His operation was meticulous, hiding illegal activity behind official reports and false arrests. The betrayal ran deep, eroding public trust and exposing the danger when authority goes unchecked. The investigation into Jenkins and the Gun Trace Task Force was extensive. Federal authorities uncovered patterns of corruption, illegal searches, and theft. Victims bravely came forward describing harassment, robbery, and abuse by those meant to protect them. Surveillance, evidence, and whistleblowers revealed the scale of the operation. Jenkins' control over his team and his careful planning made detection difficult, but the evidence was undeniable. Investigators detailed every crime: cash stolen during raids, guns unaccounted for, false charges against innocent civilians. The investigation painted a portrait of systemic corruption, an officer who turned the badge into a tool for crime rather than protection. Wayne Jenkins, and several members of the gun trace task force were eventually arrested and charged with racketeering, conspiracy, and multiple counts of theft and misconduct. The trial revealed the shocking depth of their betrayal. Witnesses testified about the fear and intimidation inflicted on civilians. Evidence of stolen property, planted evidence, and falsified reports left no doubt about Jenkins's guilt. He was convicted and sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The case became emblematic of the dangers of unchecked authority and corruption within law enforcement. The Wayne Jenkins case is a chilling reminder that power can be twisted into something destructive. A badge, meant to symbolize trust and protection, became a tool of greed and fear. Communities were left traumatized, trust shattered, and lives disrupted. Jenkins' betrayal stands as a stark warning. Authority without accountability can destroy the very people it was meant to protect, leaving a legacy of fear and mistrust that lasts for years. In what should have been a safe and ordinary community, a nightmare unfolded. Christina Registers, a police officer sworn to protect, became the center of a shocking child kidnapping case. Her actions shattered trust, leaving families and a community in disbelief. Christina Registers was a respected officer in her local police department. Known for community involvement and dedication to her duties, she seemed like a model law enforcement officer. But behind the uniform lurked a dark breach of trust. Her position gave her access to families and children, access she would exploit in the most disturbing way. The shocking events began when a child was reported missing in her jurisdiction. Authorities quickly discovered irregularities in the investigation. Evidence pointed to an unlikely suspect, Officer Registers. She had allegedly lured the child, exploiting her position and authority. Her actions were deliberate, premeditated, and a betrayal of every principle of policing. Parents and neighbors were stunned, questioning how someone entrusted with public safety could commit such a heinous act. The psychological impact on the community was immense. Families feared for their own children, and trust in law enforcement was deeply shaken. The case highlighted the potential for abuse when authority is misused, and the vulnerable are targeted. The investigation into Registers' actions was swift and thorough. Detectives gathered evidence, including witness statements, surveillance footage, and forensic records. The child's safe recovery became the top priority, while authorities worked to uncover the full extent of Registers' involvement. Interviews with colleagues and neighbors revealed patterns of manipulation and abuse of power, painting a chilling portrait of betrayal from within the police force. Investigators faced the dual challenge of protecting the child and ensuring justice. Every detail mattered: how Registers gained trust, how she circumvented safety protocols, and the evidence needed to hold her accountable. The process was meticulous, exposing a side of law enforcement rarely seen by the public. Christina Registers was arrested and charged with child kidnapping and related offenses. The trial drew national attention, highlighting the rarity and severity of an officer committing such a crime. Witnesses testified about her methods, the child's ordeal, and the betrayal of trust. Forensic and circumstantial evidence confirmed her guilt. Registers was convicted and sentenced, ensuring that justice was served and sending a strong message that no one is above the law, no matter the badge they wear. The Christina Registers case is a stark reminder of the vulnerability of trust and the consequences when it is broken. An officer sworn to protect became a predator in plain sight. Families were left traumatized, communities shaken, and the public reminded that vigilance is crucial. Her story serves as a chilling example of betrayal within the law enforcement system and a warning that authority, when misused, can endanger those it was meant to protect.